Keep your mic on for.
Yeah, I just turned it on. It's through this, so I'm gonna have to normalize it with Premiere, but it'll be all right. Okay, so main thing is Perforce. We got a couple of settings that we have to change by default. Everything is turned off and made readable with Perforce. So what that does, it makes everything read-only, and if you're using your personal machine and have pulled someone else's files, especially Unreal, you've gotten a lot of weird and obscure errors. That is because the read-only and trying to generate a Visual Studio file don't interact well. So what you have to do here in the settings that I've kind of find worked for me, you can do this two ways. If you already have it, you can go to Edit and Edit Workspace. I found this yesterday after going through making new workspaces and trying this, and you go to Advanced. These are the two settings I think that you need. All right, that literally makes all files writable. The thing is, Perforce is made out of. Let me pull up my text document that I had yesterday. That's the wrong one. And that, well, all right, and Clobber. Those two interact weirdly, and I found some documentation on it. Essentially, changing Clobber from no Clobber to Clobber in your client spec removes safeguards against clobbering writable files. Now, the problem, yes.
What the fuck does clobber mean?
It's merging.
Okay.
So, by default, and I'll go to this HTML here and read this. Well, you can read this, hopefully. Hopefully, we're in college. It is the P4 sync, which is where you grab all the stuff. But comparing it to what was last synced, if it was modified, then error control message will have if you have no clobber. So it won't change anything if you change the file. That's kind of good. But then if you had changed, like if let's say you'd opened up the file, like opened up a Blender file or anything like that, and then someone else had changed the Blender file, then it wouldn't change it. It would give you a no clobber error. So that's why I think you need to turn it on and just make sure that you lock the files when you check them out. That's where it kind of seems like those two are valuable. You can discuss with your group if that's something you want to do. If you want to do no clobber, just be aware that if you're like not getting stuff through your repo or not being able to pull stuff, this might be the setting that's causing you problems. Also, apparently, whenever it's writable, so whenever you change the read-only to all write, or whenever you change read-only and you set it to write inside your own machine after you pull it from the workspace, it will not pull files unless you set it back to read-only, and you'll get a clobber error then as well. It's a really weird set of events, so that's why I think turning on all write and clobber and just maintaining good communication with your group is probably your best option. And making sure that you're actually checking out files and locking files and stuff like that. That should prevent all the errors, but if bad communication and or working on the same file, that creates some errors. So again, those are the two files that you need to turn on, all write and clobber. I'm going to make a new workspace and show you guys how to do that real quick because this kind of requires me to do a dry run. So new workspace gives you a random number. So I have to turn all these off. And then advanced, make sure you turn on all write and clobber again. These other ones, I don't think they matter as much for us. The compression, this one didn't matter. There's also an auto sync setting that I saw, but it seemed to just be another continuation or alt sync. It seemed to be another continuation of these two working in tandem. So I think they may have done some changes to that. If I pulled that, I need to get the latest. This will give me a second. And then while I'm doing that, I'm going to launch. Well, I need to open that up and launch Unreal. But again, that's all the changes you have to make in the Perforce. Now all the stuff's in the Unreal. But yeah, so the P4V, I use the Unreal. This actually sets it up to where you can commit from Unreal, Perforce, and JetBrains, all three. And it's really nice. Okay, so this is how we set up Unreal. There is one problem that I found with Unreal that me and Quinlan both had, and that's where the Visual Studio plugin doesn't work well. I don't know how well it works with JetBrains, because JetBrains sometimes uses the Visual Studio. Like works as a layer over top of it. So I'm going to still check and make sure it's working, because I think it somehow messes with the build tool and generating Visual Studio files. Okay, so once you get your new one, first thing you're going to do is go to Edit and Plugins. And for some reason that pulls up on my main window. This is the one that gets unclicked randomly. I do not know why. But just make sure that's turned on. Next step, kind of dealer's choice. I usually, after I check and make sure that's done, I go Tools. And this will either say Generate or Refresh Visual Studio Project. And this will take 30 seconds to a minute. This happens if you have a P4 ignore that's purging all your Visual Studio project or all your Visual Studio files, which hopefully you are, because those get changed literally every time you make one little change. Then we can do the revision control. And this is literally the same as entering in your stuff. So I had this pulled up over here. Sometimes it's different. I don't know why. There we go, perfect. All right, accept that. That should set it up over here. And then now your Unreal should have it all set up. So last thing is now JetBrains. For some reason, it pulls it up over here. This one, I do it from the host folder, and it'll give you options of whether or not you want to do the solution or the Unreal project. I did the solution once, and for some reason, it gave me a weird building option. So I did U project. I'm not had any of that weird building option. I would do a U project, because then it knows it's an Unreal project, and that's its default, is that's an Unreal Engine project versus a Visual Studio solution. And then it IntelliSense and like works it out for, it takes probably about a minute for the first time it runs. Let's see if I can pull it up over here. But literally, it's like the Visual Studio. If you've seen it already with the Unreal, it takes a little bit to sense out and organize the project inside the editor. But some fun things about JetBrains is that it will actually, when you do your build and run, it builds and it runs immediately, so you don't have to go build and then local Windows debugger. If you've messed with that already, if you do not build after you make a change, it will not make that change. And if you run the local Windows debugger, it will run the previous executable version of your files, so you won't actually be checking out whatever changes you made in your code. So that's really fun. That's really good for this. While this is setting up, I'm going to go ahead and set up some of the version control stuff. There's two things you have to do. This is actually second. You have to go into settings and go to version control, Perforce, and set this up. And then I actually had to go look at my workspace client. I'm not sure if, I don't know if it works better if you don't put it in or not, but I actually just go and look it up. So let me go pull up my P4V over here and just grab this real quick. But that's the only thing you have to grab, no pathing or anything like that. And then you'll see the test connection down here. I kept on trying to do this. You do not actually have to test connection. It will give you an error that's not indicative of whether or not it's connected or not. And then after you've set that up, after you've given it that pathing, you go to Share Project, Other Services, Perforce. Give it a second. You can do blueprints with it as well. So like I checked and I built blueprints into the thing. So it does C++ and blueprints. Okay. And it keeps track of both of them.
That's in JetBrains, like when you open up the U project?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like you'll still run it like you're running it from Visual Studio, do the build and run, but then once you get in the Unreal editor, you can save all your blueprints from there. And I haven't fully tested it, but I don't think like it has as much of the. So to explain this problem, Visual Studio had a big discrepancy of you either had to save with the live coding in Unreal or go to Visual Studio, close the Unreal editor or kill it in Visual Studio, and then save and run again and build and run again. If you're doing blueprints, you can probably get away with doing the live coding there and just updating it with that, and then going back here if you do any C++ in header editing.
But without that, if they didn't want to use JetBrains,
you could actually do it from Unreal, so I can show that in a second. Like if you have all this set up, cool. My Perforce did not work. So let me see. Does it have any trailing white space? Oh, I see why. It's because I pulled the wrong repo, or I pulled the wrong workspace, so that's why it's giving me a bad connection. So let me pull up my P4V over here. Yeah. Also, if you have one downloaded, I can show you how to clean up and delete your stuff. Basically, you just need to push everything you have, and then you run a cleanup, and then you can remove it from your machine. It'll get very angry if you try to remove it before that. There we go. See, it looks perfect. So now if I crash this,
yeah.
and the subsequent builds get faster. It's just where this is the initial build after pulling from the repo, it takes a little bit longer. Also, the Intel sensing out files takes a little bit longer the first time than the other times. Like this time took about 2-3 minutes. After this, takes about 30 seconds to a minute. All right, cool. So, like Jason was asking, if you want to make a change to a blueprint, now that you have all the Perforce set up in Visual Studio and in JetBrains and in P4V, you can literally do commits from all three of them. So P4V, if I wanted to change like the read-only file, I could go change read-only and do a direct push from here, and it will what?
You mean the README?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the README, and now it won't try to save to somewhere else because it's not read-only; it's writable. If I want to make a change to my test blueprint, turn off of that. So see, you'll get the chat, you'll get the question mark, and now it's marked for add. Now, when this eventually fades away. View changes. My temp blueprint child. Submit content. And now you can make your post so and you can opt to keep them checked out if you like borrowed these files from somewhere else or if you have them checked out in your P4V. And then if I look at my P4V, that opens up in the main console. If I view the history, added temp blueprint child today. The only other thing outside of that is if I go here, so it's in source. If I go to make a change in here, this shouldn't create a problem. This shouldn't create too big of a problem, but probably best practice is to kill it if you're going to go edit a bunch of code in here. Where I made a change in here, I can update. I can pull the project, so that's what update does. Is it just pulls? It's the get current, and then allows you to revert unchanged files if you pull it, or you can change stuff. So where I made a change to this, if I don't want to revert it, I cannot. And then resolve the P4 sync. That was the alt sync that I was talking about earlier. This kind of forces over top of what you're doing, so it will overwrite anything you have open written. Probably don't want to do that in most cases unless like what you're doing was just prototyping and nothing was working out. And then if you run resolve, that's kind of like the merge conflict in GitHub if you've dealt with that, and that's where you just side by side look at what has been added and what you currently have and try to resolve that two issues. So if I want to commit, I can stage that commit directly, select what I don't want, what I do want. For some reason, the unversioned files include like a directory for JetBrains. I don't mess with it. I just leave those out. And then I do the test files for this class. It'll actually show you what changes you've made, like you're doing a merge conflict in Visual Studio, which is kind of nice. And you can add your comment there. So this doesn't matter. I would not worry about this. Revert unchanged files. You may want to do this if you are, again, messing with stuff that you didn't really have any effective changes to. The rest of these I would not worry about. You can reformat, you can rearrange code, but ideally you're the one that's working on this section of the game, and you should be writing pretty clean code anyway. So I would not click these so that you can at least go back and remember what you were doing if someone else was doing it. But otherwise, it should be like it acts, from what I've seen, kind of like how Visual Studio optimizes code where it just fixes the brackets and the spacing. So click submit. There we go, one file committed. And if I check the P4V, add a comment at the bottom. So now, hopefully this should all be pushed. The writable will overwrite stuff. So if you have copies of like Blender files and others like that, and you do the collaborable option, I would make sure you push before you pull, essentially. So that way you make sure that you override it with the actual good new files that you've added. So I would say everyone here, if you've worked on art especially, you need to push all the stuff out of your repo and then get the latest if you do the collaborable options. Yeah, that's essentially where I got with it. If you guys run into anything, I'd love to hear about it. And that's basically it. But now you should be able to edit code from here, from P4V, and from Unreal, and it all works in tandem. Yeah, any questions?
The good thing to do with the clobber, I see a lot of people with version control that they'll give a copy of the code along that, then they'll work for a week, and then they push it up and they end up overwriting changes that other people have made and they don't pull down. Is there any danger with that with the clobber, or is that separate?
There is. So that's where the clobber like really comes into play, and you need to make sure you're pulling from main as soon as you get changes, and just make sure you have your file, like the file that you're working on, locked so that it doesn't overwrite the changes that you made to that file that you've made changes to. So make sure you're checking out and locking. But essentially what that will do is it will actually overwrite your open and unopened file, both your open and unopened files. So if David or Zach send me a level or a Blender asset or an updated version of them, I can pull those down, but my files, if I'm working on the projectile, will not be changed.
Okay. And also, just everybody being careful about what you check in those change lists. Like, you don't want to overwrite somebody else's code. So, like, is this something that I changed myself?
Yeah, and that's where, like, both of them were really good about, like, you saw this one, it only had this. So, like,
Locking basically makes the file that you've checked out and locked immune to anyone else using it, right?
yes.
And nobody would break lock. You'd have to have like admin privilege to break.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to have admin do like console commands, from what I've seen.
Danger of that. That's another problem I see is people lock a thing and then go away for the weekend and nobody else can work on that thing.
That's a problem that I have that I think about constantly. I think it's just mainly if you know you're going to go away for the weekend and you don't like, I'm not able to connect to the Perforce server at my house. Essentially, once you get back, you need to lock that file whenever you get back, and then you can like lock your changes in, pull from the repo, and then that way.
And where do you do the locking? Is it P4V? Is it JetBrains? Any of those?
I've not seen the locking in P4 or in Unreal or this. I've only seen it in P4V.
I think Unreal automatically locks things, doesn't it, when you start to make changes to it, or is that?
I've been solo on this so far because I'm sure we'll find out really quickly here in the next like 30 minutes to an hour as everyone's crying. But hopefully you'll have the change list and you'll be able to roll it back and compare and do stuff. So it's like if you guys don't pull from the repo and just post your 5 changes, you should have 5, like however many members of your group copies, and you can go and revert this back to that point in time. Like literally you right click it and then you can get revisioning or do whatever, or even branch it at that point and make the changes there. And you can see the change list and everything like that. But so like if I go to commit here, I can view and I can even revert there. There's that change. Oh, I didn't make a good change there. So I only send the changes to this to the Perforce. And then the next time I pull it, it should pull a fresh version of this. It might give me like an error, it won't give me an error because I have clobberable on, but it'll give me this got overwritten. So let's see if I update project. So revert unchanged files and run resolve. So let's see if I do that. It should be because I just posted the last one. Now that I'm realizing that. So let's see. Yeah, both of those. So let's try to revert it. And see, it'll show you the 2 files you've changed. And you can go and revert those back to what they were before. I love how this only opens up over here. So if I know I'm working on I don't know where it's at. If I know I'm working on this, I can lock this. Gosh, I'm blanking on where lock is. I can lock, and then this should not have changes now that are not mine.
You have to submit that before they see the lock, right?
Yeah. Only if you're connected, though. So if you're out of the building and it's not connected, which usually P4V won't launch if you do that, like wouldn't even let me work offline. But now everything's writable and everything like that, should be able to, you can make changes on your machine and then go and do the change list later.